Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the South Central Fresno AB 617 Steering Committee meeting. Just a couple of logistical items before we get started. The restrooms are located outside that door and to the left. We do, once again, have translation headsets for both English and Spanish. You should all have one on your chair. If you have one that's not working, please raise your hand and we can come get you a new headset. We have several staff members in attendance today who can help you. Cynthia here is going to be taking copious notes throughout the discussion. Everything that you say, she's going to be writing down so that we can make sure all of the committee's input is captured. We're having some problems. Well, Facebook is having some problems, and so as a result, we're not able to do Facebook Live at this time. We're going to keep trying throughout the meeting to try to get that working. But we are videotaping tonight's session, and we'll post that on the website as soon as possible. Kids, any kids tonight? We have a kids table right outside, and you're also welcome to use the Boys and Girls Club game room. And tonight's meeting is going to follow the same general format that we had last time. Okay. Yes, Rachel is going to be supervising the kids back there, so there will be an adult. For the format tonight, we are going to start with a presentation from the Air District for some of the items. We'll ask you to please hold questions until the end, and then we'll provide the opportunity for committee members to ask any questions. And then after that, we'll pass the microphone around so that everyone has the opportunity to speak. From there, we'll go to public comment. Each agenda item has a public comment period as well as public comment at the end. We ask that you limit comments to 2 minutes. And then we'll come back and summarize the committee discussion. If additional discussion is needed, we'll do that. And we'll determine if there's consensus. And if not, from there, we can take a vote if necessary. One final item that I wanted to raise before we get started. At the Shafter Steering Committee meeting on Monday, the committee decided to start the meetings a little bit earlier at 5:30, and we just wanted to see by a show of hands if that's something that this committee would be interested in. So I have 14 in favor, and those opposed, if you could raise your hand. And 3 opposed. And Erica, Cody, can we see if we can get the air turned?
No. For the upcoming meetings, how cold is this room going to be? Because I'm also incredibly heat sensitive because of my garden and stuff.
Right.
So that's all.
We'll look into that for sure. As it gets hotter, we'll definitely. Sure. Okay. So for those who wanted to meet a little bit earlier, does 5:30 work, or would you prefer 5 o'clock? 5:30. Okay. So moving forward, we will go ahead and start these meetings at 5:30, and that will be reflected in the agenda and all the materials. So our first item is a continuation of the community boundary discussion. And to kick that off, I'd like to welcome Samir Sheikh.
Thank you, and good evening. I hope everybody is having a good day and that it's an even better evening here with tonight's meeting. First, I just wanted to thank the steering committee on this issue of the community boundary discussion. Based on the last meeting, there's definitely been a lot of food for thought in terms of how we take advantage of the 617 process to really maximize opportunities for as much of Southern Fresno as possible with this process. And so one of the big things that we want to cover tonight are all the different principles and factors that we think need to be considered as we collectively decide and try to act on the authorities that we have under AB 617, both collectively between the steering committee and the local air district, and try to expand the boundary as much as possible. So we want to kind of walk through some of those principles tonight. I want to say that as we think about these issues, it's going to be really important, from our perspective as a local agency that's working with you in this process, to keep in mind a couple of really key issues related to AB 617. One of them is, and you'll hear from Jessica tonight as she walks through a presentation, that we're going to open it up to conversation and input from the committee. One of those issues is that under AB 617, with the bill and then with the CARB process and blueprint, there really is a big desire to focus in as much as possible on a community and do as much as possible within that community, with the understanding that over time, we're going to grow this program, add even more and more communities over time, and use what we learn in this process to do an even better job moving forward across as much of the valley and state as possible. That's a really important principle, because I think as we think about expanding the boundaries, there are going to be limited resources that are available to do everything from monitoring and emission reduction, air pollution projects, clean air efforts, and so it is a real issue in terms of just making sure that we keep that in the back of our heads as we think about growing the boundaries and how much we can actually do within each of these communities. My commitment on that as the head of the local air pollution control district is to fight for as much resources as possible. Even right now we're in the legislature actually fighting for even more resources. As we talk about expanding the boundary, we're able to do even more in these communities and also beyond whatever we end up doing within these established boundaries. Other parts of Fresno, other parts of the valley that are also all very interested in working with us on these types of programs. The other issue is that we are pretty deep into there's a very short time frame for AB 617 within this year. And so one thing that we're ready to do is the second that we are able to establish the final boundary on the committee, we need to go out there and recruit some additional steering committee members. By the way, we are the largest. I've been talking to other agencies and the California Air Resources Board. This steering committee is actually the largest one in the state right now, as far as I understand it. I think we can add more members, and I think we need to quickly go out there, recruit additional members to reflect whatever we add to the boundary, and then catch them up. And so we're ready to basically go out there, have some extra meetings, I think, with those members to bring them up to speed on all the issues that have already been covered, get their initial thoughts, try to essentially, in parallel, bring them to where the rest of the committee is right now, and then have a quick and smooth transition to make that happen. And I've heard a lot of commitments, by the way, from a lot of the steering committee members here that I've been speaking to about some of these issues. There's a lot of commitment to help us do that, and we're going to take you up on that commitment. So we'll need your list of folks that you think would be interested, and we're actually going to go out there and do some collective outreach to make sure we bring additional members and catch them up and then keep moving forward. So you have that commitment from us as well to quickly act on that. What I'm hoping tonight, my expectation for tonight, is that we share with you some thoughts and some potential alternatives for where the boundaries can be based on everything we think we have the authority to do, essentially, under AB 617. We'll see how far along we can get. Hopefully there's consensus on where we end up with those final boundaries. If we can't reach consensus, or if we can't get recommendations that seem to fit within what we understand the constraints to be, excuse me, the commitment that you have from us is that within a 1-week period, we would finalize the boundaries and move forward with all the recruitment and all the catch-up work that needs to happen. Now, I am hoping that tonight, as staff walks through the presentation, and then as you decide and deliberate and advise on where you want to see this go, I am hoping that tonight we do get basically to a final place where we can just then talk about, hey, how do we actually get into these other parts of the community and do all the catch-up that we need to do. That would be ideal. That would be what I would hope would be the goal. If we can't quite get there, then it would be a very fast process. Take all the input. We'd have to go back out, consult with the California Air Resources Board, review the statute, review the blueprint, see what we could do with the recommendations, and there will be a final determination made within a 1-week period of this meeting, where we then take you up on the same offer to go out there and make sure the steering committee is still viable, activated, everybody's caught up. So Jessica Olson is going to actually walk through a pretty brief presentation. She's going to walk through some of the issues that have been considered, basically what we've done with the recommendations that came out of the last meeting and how we've tried to use that to basically maximize the boundary as much as possible, and then open it up to conversation, and hopefully we're able to keep this moving forward. I am very excited by the possibilities here. I think that what we're talking about is doing some pretty significant changes to the boundaries to reflect some of the concerns that we've been hearing for some time. I'm hoping we can take advantage of that and do even more, with this process so that we bring these resources to South Fresno. And so with that, I just want to turn it over to staff, and I'll be here for, for the entire item, paying attention very closely to the input that's said, and I'd be happy to take some questions. Do you need a mic? No. There's one right here.
After the board meeting, you and I had this discussion about map expansion. And I believe I suggested to you, why don't you do the biggest footprint possible since AB 617 has a multi-year approach. Is this the best you can do?
So I suggest we walk through the presentation so everybody can see what that process is.
Well, I was just wondering why we have why you're not doing a bigger footprint from just the get-go.
And again, we can walk through the presentation to explain that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Samir. As he mentioned, my name is Jessica Olson, and I am the program manager of the Air Quality Analysis Modeling and Monitoring teams with the Valley Air District. And I'm here to help the steering committee and the district sort of collectively consider some adjustments to the community boundary based on the feedback that we got from the last meeting. And so with that, we'll just dive right in. I kind of want to get to the maps, as I'm sure you're all itching to get to as well. But first, we kind of just want to set the stage and kind of take you through the process, if we haven't done so already, on how CARB's community was selected in the first place. And so when this community, and this is the boundary outlined here in blue on this slide, was officially selected by the Air Resources Board last September, it was done so throughout this public input process with over a year of consideration, and it was done based on this prioritization approach that included a number of different indicators. That first indicator that's listed there, we talked about a little bit last meeting, that's the numerous health indicators from that Cal EnviroScreen tool, so looking at the rankings of the different communities based on a variety of health and socioeconomic factors. But then we also looked at a variety of indicators outside of just using that tool. One of the main indicators was population-weighted exposure to diesel PM, and that's really to recognize that diesel PM is the single largest air pollutant contributor to cancer risk here in the valley, and so taking that into account was an important addition to that Cal EnviroScreen tool. Next, we looked at population-weighted exposure to high PM 2.5 and ozone levels, and we actually weighted PM 2.5 higher than ozone when we did that ranking. And that, again, is because PM 2.5 has even more impact on health than ozone does. And then finally, we, of course, took in other socioeconomic factors when it came time to considering this boundary and getting it approved by the Air Resources Board. When this was approved by the Air Resources Board in September of last year, a number of Valley advocates did support this recommendation. A little slight change that they had was that larger area in that bottom left-hand corner that included sort of the Daleville area all the way out to 41 was part of their initial recommendation. So moving forward, as many of you recall, I think a lot of you on this committee were here last month, when the steering committee collectively recommended that the district significantly expand that CARB-approved boundary to include the area outlined here in yellow. And so that original boundary was 14.4 square miles, as outlined in blue, and included about 97,000 people. And that's that area of South Central Fresno, with a couple small residential communities within South Central Fresno of Calwa and Malaga. Now, this yellow area that was recommended, and if you recall last time, was mostly recommended, or at least based on discussion, recommended based on the Cal EnviroScreen scores, significantly expands the community sort of out to the left to include an additional community of Southwest Fresno. It includes some of the industrial area outside of Malaga that's a little bit larger than that initial sort of carve out of Malaga that we have in the original boundary. Some of the rural Fresno County area to the east of Malaga, so that bottom right-hand corner outlined in yellow on your map, as well as the industrial triangle. So what we wanted to do is the district took this kind of as promised and sort of in the advisory capacity that the steering committee is in, took all of that input and tried to collectively look at these boundary adjustments and see what we can do to take into consideration all of these different factors. And so since there was such a significant and sort of transformative change proposed to the boundary, we put together this set of guiding principles, and I believe you guys all actually also have the handout to these, which describes a little bit more detail. that will help us, the district, and you, the steering committee, sort of bound this discussion and sort of guide us to a way to analyze these boundary adjustments, similar to what Samir just mentioned, sort of within not only the constraints, of course, of wanting to make sure we hit at the most disadvantaged communities, but also take into account the law of AB 6117, the spirit of it being a community-defined program, and all sorts of other resource constraints. So we're just going to go through these in a little bit of detail here, and then we'll get to talking about the boundary adjustments. So the first guiding principle is to fully acknowledge and consider the committee's recommendations and concerns. And this first, of course, includes the committee's request to expand the boundary to include some sources nearby but outside the current CARB-defined boundary. So many of the committee members mentioned that there are a number of sources of industrial pollution in the greater Malaga area, and warehouse activities sort of in that reverse triangle area. And so if you've already peeked ahead at some of the proposed or possible changes to the boundary, you'll notice that those are kind of all in consideration in all three of those adjustments. So that was something we did take into consideration and are proposing here today. The committee also wished to focus AB 617 resources on the most disadvantaged areas. And so what that means, of course, is taking into account those areas that were outlined last time in the committee that do rank in that top Cal EnviroScreen score, but also making sure that we focus the resources. The further we expand, as Samir mentioned earlier, that just means that our resources are being spread a little bit more thin. So one of the considerations under this guiding principle is to perhaps, if we're trying to focus on most disadvantaged communities, there are some communities in the current CARB-defined boundary that are not even in the top 5% of the Cal EnviroScreen score. So it's possible that if we do some enlargement of the community boundary in other areas, we might possibly consider maybe removing some of the areas in the north that do not qualify kind of under that particular factor. Something to keep in mind is that kind of as we go through this is, as it stands right now, that would remove 6 members from this committee who would no longer be residents within that boundary. So just keeping that in mind, again, as we guide this discussion forward. Our second guiding principle is to acknowledge and honor CARB's decision with respect to the original community selection and their blueprint guidance on selecting community boundaries. So there are kind of a couple of things at play here. The first is that the AB 617 selection of the South Central Fresno community was done so with the intent of this being an urban community. And what that means is that we, throughout this process and throughout the state, there are actually some urban communities and there are some rural communities. And so with some of the adjustments that have been suggested by this committee, there would be not only a large expansion to include sort of a distinct different community, but it would be a distinct different community possibly if it was extended into a rural area with very distinct different pollution sources of concern. And so that is just something to consider, that if we are trying, not only as CARB and the district recommended, but even some of the advocates that are on this committee, when they nominated this community, nominated it as representing an urban community. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then additionally, we want to keep in mind some of the selection and blueprint community guidance. And what I mean by that is, within that blueprint, CARB certainly allows some adjustments to be made, but we want to keep in mind that this community boundary, as it's defined now, was selected and adopted under a public process and was intended to represent South Central Fresno. Again, it's for all of the reasons we listed before, the Cal EnviroScreen score, the pollution factors, the other socioeconomic and population-weighted distributions that we talk about. And so significantly or really transformatively changing that doesn't really do justice to the community that we want to focus those resources on. So that, again, that's just something to keep in mind as we move forward. And then our third guiding principle really sort of is four-pronged. So it's to carefully consider the impact of the boundary changes on the committee's responsibilities. So that's to recognize, as Samir mentioned, we have extremely short time frames, so we just have to keep that in mind. We are definitely open and would like to, if we expand the community, make sure we get people on board as quickly as possible, because we have a lot of things upcoming that we want this committee's input on. We also need to make sure that once we bring those new committee members on, we provide for education of these new members, including informational materials, discussion of activities and recommendations to date that this committee has already provided. So we just want to make sure that we work with this committee once we get new members on board to make sure this happens rapidly. And our goal is to get people on board and sort of caught up to speed before our next meeting. So we just kind of want to let you know that's our commitment, and we want to work with you to do that. Finally, the last two parts of considering changes to committee responsibilities is that the committee membership must represent the community. And so that's something I touched on a little bit earlier. So significant expansion will require, of course, reassessment of committee membership and making sure we include people that represent that new expanded boundary. But we also have to consider the size of the community, or the committee rather, that Samir mentioned earlier, fairness of removing current members who have already sort of been a valuable resource on the committee, new application processes, delays moving forward. Again, just some considerations, or as these are guiding principles for sort of guiding this discussion moving forward. And then finally, something that we're going to kind of touch on, I think, a lot throughout this discussion is we really need to consider that we assure that there's a meaningful use of available resources. And these resources are both in the terms of monitoring. The outline right now, that blue original outline, is already a very large area. And so when we try to do community monitoring, we want to make sure that we can have monitors that are sort of more concentrated, are able to help us define maybe where pollution comes from, which sources it's coming from, and how it's impacting that community. And that just becomes harder and harder as the community gets larger and larger. So something to keep in mind for resources on the monitoring side. And then, of course, finally, the emission reduction funding is limited. And we want to make sure that, again, as we spread out the community, and there's still a set amount of funds, obviously, the emissions reductions that we can get per square mile will be affected by that, at least based on the amount of funds that we can invest in the community as we move forward with sort of those emissions reductions programs that we'll talk about over the next coming months. So finally, before we get into a few of the maps, I just wanted to address something. So I'm sure those of you who have looked ahead did notice that none of these potential adjustments, at least that are in this presentation, include the community of Southwest Fresno. And so a lot of that has to do with those guiding principles that I just outlined. The intent of the community to be this urban community, the intent of this community to represent one community and not sort of a collection of different distinct communities, the original prioritization process that CARB went through to select this community, sort of honoring that, making sure we're not drastically changing the community that was already selected. And so kind of keeping all of those in mind, when the district did an assessment of including that part of Southwest Fresno, we decided, or at least when we were coming up with potential adjustments, did not include it in these maps that we're about to go over. Now, that being said, we are fully committed, and again, Samir mentioned this already, to exploring opportunities to ensure Southwest Fresno is given strong consideration for the next community selection process. This is an ongoing yearly process at ARB, so this is not the only time communities can be selected. And we will also commit to working with Southwest Fresno to leverage resources outside of AB 617 continually to examine and address air quality concerns as foreseeable given the resources that we have. And so this commitment can include monitoring and other technical resources, emission reductions incentive funding for the area, and then also leveraging the transformative climate community investments that are being made right now specifically for the Southwest Fresno community. And then kind of all of that being said, these community boundaries or the emissions reductions that we're getting in whatever boundaries we choose tonight or by next week aren't black and white. And so whatever emissions reductions that we get within that community certainly will have an impact on surrounding communities. And it's very possible that some of the emissions programs that we creatively come up with together have sort of far-reaching actions or benefits and maybe have applications outside that community. This community boundary just means that we are going to take this community, specifically look at what's impacting it, even if that source comes from outside the community. If it impacts the community that we select, it will be something we take a look at and try to figure out how we can reduce emissions that are impacting the boundary that we decide. So I just kind of want to make sure that we had all of that out before we started going through these boundary adjustments. So potential boundary adjustment number 1, and I'm kind of looking at the printout, I apologize, on the green isn't quite as obvious, so hopefully it's a little bit better up here on the screen. And so the potential boundary adjustment number 1 expands the community to capture a number of the industrial sources that were brought up at the steering committee and kind of throughout this whole process. And so if you look down to the bottom right, it extends that bottom right corner to include some industrial areas around Malaga. It also extends that bottom left corner to include the industrial triangle. Now, when we came up with the committee's recommendation last month, it did not include this little sliver that's sort of highlighted here, which is the community of Daleville, but sort of based on the recommendations from the committee and some of the concerns about industrial sources in the area, we did include that in this potential boundary adjustment. So with this, as mentioned, of course, we want to keep in consideration the size of the committee. We wanted to keep into consideration the size of the boundary for resource purposes, which is sort of how we got to boundary adjustment number 2. And boundary adjustment number 2, which should just be a better way actually on that bottom to look at sort of what this is, that bottom half is exactly boundary adjustment number 1. The only change here is that this takes into consideration all of those resources that are going to be really spread out the more and more we expand the boundary. So the thought here is that to sort of go with the committee's recommendation to focus the resources on the most disadvantaged communities, and given that the expansion would spread the community out a little bit, this adjustment includes removing 4 census tract areas that are not in the top 5% Cal Enviro screen score. And this, again, is just to sort of fairly distribute or make sure we focus in on those communities that were of concern last time. I think we're going to hold questions till the end. Oh, I'm sorry. No, you're so right. It's a problem. Okay, I can. Thank you very much. So I was saying that this community boundary is very similar to the first boundary that we just showed. The only difference is that in order to focus the resources within a community and make sure we're focusing it on the most disadvantaged communities, we, in this potential adjustment, remove 4 census tracts that are sort of in that top area, and that's sort of what that cutout is on the top of the map, in order to kind of accommodate for the addition. And so, and kind of taking a look at this expansion, to some point that was made earlier, doesn't necessarily presume that we're just expanding to include a lot more people, but definitely focuses on a lot of the feedback that we got from this committee. So finally, this is potential boundary adjustment number 3. And this is a little, pretty much that same concept on top, and I'll get to why that is in a second. But this adds that Malaga industrial area, so that area surrounding the Malaga residential area we had originally. But it also expands the industrial triangle area all the way out to Cherry Avenue. So that includes Daleville, that community out there, all the way up to right where it meets sort of, I guess that's right along Railroad Avenue there. So you can see it's a significant expansion from the past 2 recommendations, but because of this and sort of in light of recommendation or proposed adjustment number 2, also cuts those areas up into the north, once again, to sort of focus in on the community. Something I want to point out here is this adds a lot of those industrial sources that are of concern. So this is a lot more of the source expansion, and we're looking at a lot more sources than we were in that original boundary or in the other 2 boundaries. So with that, we're definitely going to talk about all of these boundaries right now, but I just wanted to let you know what Samir just mentioned. There are kind of 2 ways we'll go about this. If we reach a consensus on any of the boundary adjustments today, kind of going through our guiding principles and seeing how we can use that to guide these adjustment discussions, then we'll immediately start working with the committee to recruit and bring up to speed new members. We encourage you to let us know who those new members should be once we define that boundary and work with us, and we will also do our own public process, and we'll do our due diligence of bringing those new members on board. If consensus is not reached today, or consensus is reached on a boundary adjustment outside of the ones that we are, the potential adjustments we're talking about today, then we will take all of those comments, take your feedback into consideration, and finalize those adjustments by next Friday, and really maximize the opportunities within the guiding principles that we just went over, and in consultation with the California Air Resources Board before we finalize those adjustments and get that out to you. And then from there, once again, that kind of starts that quick clock of recruiting new members, and kind of making those adjustments and then getting people up to speed. And then finally, as mentioned, if there are areas removed, of course, current members who reside or represent businesses in those removed areas can no longer be on the committee, so that's just some sort of guide that you need to use today when you consider these adjustments. But of course, those people are still welcome to participate as public members at all of these meetings. So, Jessica, with that, I think we'll start. I guess I'll hand it off to you.
My question on your methodology, is this on?
You might need to turn it on. Sorry.
My question on your methodology is Roding Park. I love Roding Park. Can't stand Chaffee Zoo, but I love Roding Park. And Chaffee Zoo has over 1 million visitors every year, and just the traffic alone that feeds onto 99 is of great concern to me, because there's so many visitors going into that park. And I'm wondering how come that's excluded, and also the elementary school that's right off 99 in McKinley, because I'm sure those kids don't want to get asthma either. Personally, I think all 3 of your mats are a waste of my time. Just to put it down and dirty. I do not believe you guys are actually listening to the community, because the community has requested time and time again and has told you in just plain, straight up language, they want a big footprint. And for you to bring back 3 substandard recommendations is a waste of my time.
Are there any other questions before we start committee comments?
What's your methodology with leaving out Roding?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, quickly, I'll answer Lisa's question. Our methodology as it's laid out is how that community is defined. So I don't know specifically little areas right around that boundary of if there was a specific methodology and why that was included from that.
My first question is, in your description of what's going to happen this evening, are you saying that there will not be a vote on these boundaries?
There can certainly, from my understanding of the charter, there can certainly be a vote on the boundaries.
Okay, I just hadn't heard you mention that. And my second question is, earlier it was talked about that this is like the largest committee in the state. I was just wondering how the current boundary size compares in comparison to other urban boundaries within the state.
I know it's not the largest, but it is one of the largest boundary areas in the state. I don't know exactly how it ranks.
So yeah, thank you very much. I do appreciate that you have brought back this, and it wasn't clear to me as I look at the yellow map that was the consensus, I guess, from the last time. I certainly don't recall it going all the way out to Lone Star and past that. Those were not the boundaries that I think I saw us talk about last time. It was a much smaller footprint than that, at least from our last meeting, as I recall. I have had a chance to, and I appreciate you going back to and taking a look at really the guiding principles and what was laid out in the blueprint. And as I've dug into Appendix A of the blueprint on how these were actually chosen, I am concerned that we are just kind of throwing out, at least in some ways, the work of CARB in the first place, and what CARB as the governing body for the state for air pollution, their staff in working with your staff on a scientific basis looked at forming an urban center. And there were good reasons for that. We have up to $80 million to make recommendations for. $80 million to most people seemed like a lot of money. But when you get government involved and the costs that are associated with $80 million, it's not that much money at the end of the day. What I think is important from the blueprint and what I think, I mean, certainly the city will live with whatever the committee does. It's become very clear there's no land use authority or recommendation. It makes no difference on the land use side of stuff. And I hope the report will reflect that because that is true. But what I think is important here is that we are, and I've said it once, and I think we'll end up saying a lot more, the longer you spread it, the bigger you spread the footprint, I think that's the worst you can do for our area and for our communities. Because, no, excuse me, ma'am, I've got the floor. Let me finish my comments. I'm not going to go down your comment road. But it really is the worst approach possible. Because what we want to do is we want to try to have the most effect for the dollars that we do have. And Calwa and Malaga are the most populated, the folks with the most children, with the most grandmas and grandpas who are dealing with bad air than the rest of the community. And if we go with the yellow, we've really made it more of a rural community than we have an urban community. It kind of seems like, just eyeballing it, seems like it's split 50-50. But that is certainly not what CARB was trying to do when they designated this. So I don't live in Malaga or Calwa. I work in the downtown area. But if I lived in Malaga or Calwa, I'd have a real problem with this, expanding it to areas that are very sparsely populated. I mean, to get to Daleville, and I love Daleville, and I've talked with some of those folks out there in the Orange Center School District, there's 46 homes on Daleville, and it's not really Daleville, that's Daleville residential area. They don't call themselves that. So anyway, I really think that keeping it concentrated to what it is, that $80 million is really designed to go after, as I've dug into this now, and this is the blueprint that we're supposed to follow, and AB 617 is really to go in and monitor those industries that aren't currently regulated. So I know we've had a lot of discussion about Rio Bravo, about some other companies, but those companies are actually already currently regulated by the Air Board. This is about talking about the much smaller companies, the mom and pop gas station or the auto shop or smaller folks that are not regulated, that are not directly monitored by the airport. And when you start spreading it further and further out, that $80 million gets you less and less reduction in pollution coming out from that concentrated urban area. So I certainly think what we ought to really consider, and I know we've kind of gone down that path already, what CARB did in the first place, which was science-based, not emotion-based, but science-based. I think we should honor that and make the print, if we had to, what was recommended in adjustment number 1, if we had to at all. I still think that makes it more more rural than urban, what it should be. But I really think we ought to think long and hard, and I know emotionally we want to expand it and think we can include more people. What the better course of action in my mind is that we begin working on CARB through the Air Board and others to make a second community, Southwest Fresno. and bring that in, and preferably bring that in with another $80 million. You can certainly get a lot further in pollution reduction with $160 million than you can with $80 million. And trust me, I've seen money go by very fast, unfortunately. That $80 million will disappear quickly. And I really would like to have it Malaga and Calwa get the benefit of that, not someplace in a rural area. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. There's a few things. I would say the first thing I want to mention is that Larry is stating we could always come back to Southwest Fresno. The truth of it is if you paid attention from the beginning of the selection process, there's multiple disadvantaged communities in the state of California. This is kind of like a one-shot deal for the next few years. We're not going to see anything back here in this area within this same 20-mile radius in next year. There's already communities from the first year selection that are already made priority for second year, and it's not here. It's not Southwest Fresno. So to pass it up and not dig deep as we can this first time around would really be just a disadvantage to all of the communities who are still in the same census tracts on the CalEnviro screen. The other correction that I want to make, and I went back and thank God for technology, we were able to see specifically what was said at our last steering committee meeting. And there needs to be a correction. Even what we had requested didn't actually get put on the community recommendation on page 3. What we had asked for was all of American Avenue west to Marks. And then this leads us, and that was not included in what you said, your interpretation of what we had requested in that expansion is not included in map on page number 3, first of all. Second, that leads into saying, oh, well, if you look at American down to Marks, now you're wanting to include rural, and this was a community that was supposed to be selected for urban. So we have other major power plays outside of the district, outside of this committee, and that is the city of Fresno. And yes, that is part of land use. What we know is that the industrial triangle is not just the industrial triangle going from 41 down to American over to Golden State. That planning, when you look on a 20-year general plan, the city is already zoning into over to Marks. That area is already becoming urban. So you can't say, oh, well, we're combining urban with rural communities, because that area, we're not looking at it right now, but you can't just look at what we're looking at. You got to look at all of Fresno and all the players involved. So when you look, you then realize that urban is going to be, and practically already is, because the zoning, on paper, the plan, the industrial specific plan, is including that area as industrial, as urban, not rural. So that's another correction that needs to be made. The other point I want to make is that even in these other choices or options that the Air District is giving us, you're still not seeing the bigger picture at play here, which is the industrial triangle is nothing but the next growth movement for the pollution of all the things that we're trying to keep under wraps, keep in control, and reduce. So you can't just be real specific to just this area. You have to include that. And so that is one of the main reasons. Expanding out to Marks and rural, because it's no longer rural. Also talking about reducing from McKinley and taking away board members who have put in time. That should be up to our table as it stands right now, who gets to stay. I don't think that should be something that we're excluding just because you're talking about wanting to remove the boundaries. We're in this for a reason. I'll probably have something else to say later.
Thank you. So we're going to start with comments. Lisa, do you have a question or? Okay.
I had a process question.
Larry, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I know I'm right. Here's my procedural question. Will we be voting on this, and can we please discuss the map handout? Because I really, 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 really like it. And if we reach consensus, now, is that a directive to staff to make sure it happens? Or are you guys going to come back and swipe us and say, oh, sorry, we can't, and waste more of my time?
Yeah, so I would, and maybe Jess can speak more to this since she's going to facilitate it, but I think when you guys do go around and make comments, the person who submitted that map is certainly welcome to discuss it, and you are certainly welcome to use it as one of the recommendations. But sort of given the advisory capacity of the steering committee, the district will, as promised, take that into consideration when we do make our final sort of adjustments to the map by next Friday, if you should choose that map. Once again, I think we'll just, as stated, we'll take it into consideration and kind of come back with sort of using the guiding principles that we've outlined as well, and sort of all of the things that we discussed earlier in the presentation, along with your recommendation.
So that's a no? Because it really is black and white. You either take our recommendations, you take a vote, you take our recommendations, or you don't.
This is John Claxton. Director of Strategies and Incentives at the Air District. So certainly if you want to take a vote tonight, you can take the vote. If you want to reach consensus, that's great too. Either way, we'll take that as advisement to us. We'll consider that strongly, then make a final decision on what the boundary will be for this area. That's the way it's defined in this program. The committee is an advisory role to the Air District, so we take the advice from the committee to make our final decisions. That's the way the program was designed throughout the state.
We haven't finished deciding what the advice is.
This is still being discussed, so please, we'll keep going around and get your advice, and we want to hear from everybody and what your thoughts are on the boundary, for sure, yeah.
Well, I think if we can pass it around for public comment, we'd ask that everybody comment on the specific adjustments that Jessica has presented, as well as any other recommendations that you still have.
Hi, everyone. I'm kind of on the fence of saying that I think that it would be better if we could focus all of the 80 million in an area that we can do basically an A+ job, rather than spreading it out and being, oh, maybe do a C job in a much, much larger area. You look at the data, and basically we're going to be, the original committee recommendation from February was adding in basically to a 200% more area, but only increasing the population by 25%. I just don't think that's the best use of resources from my perspective.
Yeah, good evening. Just a couple comments. I like the adjustment one because I think it brings in those areas that are more identifiable as being industrial that weren't inside the original boundaries. I don't think we should remove any of the existing area. And with regard to the comments about what's going to happen in the future, I don't think we can look at that. That's not the purpose of what we're doing here. We're looking at what's going on now. And if you're concerned about what's going to happen in the future with regard to planning, then get involved in the planning process and make comments or get involved in CEQA.
Good evening. I guess my thoughts would, I'm more partial to limit the expansion as much as possible, given that we have a tight timetable and we have a large committee already to begin with. And so let's run with the rules of the road that we have as it is. The more we're spread out, the more thin we would be. And so we spent a whole meeting about the charter. We're spending a lot of time on boundaries. My preference would be just to let's hit the ground running with what we're tasked to do with the guidelines that we have, rather than a lot of discussion, and we're already in March, and what to show for it. So I'm more partial to just hit the ground running with what we have and go forward, rather than the ebb and flow of possibilities. I absolutely respect the opinions raised because so much of Fresno needs attention, so much of Fresno has issues, but with this special opportunity, I'm more partial to let's run with what we have and go from there. So.
Yeah, kind of to piggyback off of Victor, I kind of agree with what he said, and I think we should just hit the ground running with what we established.
Bueno, yo no estoy de acuerdo en que debemos de limitar. Ahorita es la oportunidad y especialmente para quienes vivimos en las áreas afectadas, no hay un mañana. Si especialmente hoy no nos están atendiendo, no nos están tomando en cuenta, especialmente a las personas quienes somos parte fundamental de este proceso. Nuestros hijos e hijas están siendo afectadas en la manera de su calidad de vida, ¿verdad? Y especialmente ahorita con todos los rodeos que nos están dando, no nos da mucha esperanza de que nos vayan a tomar en cuenta el día de mañana. Si ahorita no lo están haciendo, no le están dando seriedad a nuestras preocupaciones, a nuestro tiempo, ¿verdad? Entonces, lo que necesitamos es de que se pongan bien serios y nos den ese respeto a nosotros como comunidad. Llegamos, trabajamos y estamos aquí y simplemente no siento que están poniendo atención a nuestras necesidades. Eso de darnos a tole con el dedo de que mañana, no. Nos está afectando ahora, no mañana, es hoy.
At the last meeting, I recommended we include Highway 99, and I see it didn't get on the map, any of the maps. That's a large source of diesel and all kinds of exhaust. Also, West Fresno, I believe, should be included. It has many elementary schools. So pretty much, I'm just saying we should keep the committee recommendation from February and over to, what is that, Marks? And take Highway 99 all the way like the committee recommendation. It'll include all the interchanges that we have slow cars, we have jammed up traffic at many times, morning and evening, and we can monitor that better.
Yo lo que quiero decir el día de hoy es de que ¿cómo vamos a tener claro realmente qué quieren de nosotros en este comité? A mí, en lo particular, no me gustaría que pase algo que ustedes que están administrando todo esto, decidan cómo van a usar ese dinero y cuáles van a ser las áreas y que después se justifiquen diciendo que un comité asesoró y que un comité estuvo de acuerdo en en elegir esas áreas que ustedes ya tienen planeados. Es algo que a mí no me gustaría ser parte de estar sentada aquí horas, que al final esas recomendaciones que todos estamos dando y estamos diciendo que no estamos de acuerdo, ustedes lo finalicen y digan que tuvimos un comité y ese comité estuvo presente. Entonces eso sería nada más estar jugando con nosotros, decir exactamente qué quieren. ¿Quieren recomendaciones? Estamos dando recomendaciones. Ya estamos diciendo de dónde a dónde estamos recomendando que sea esta área. Y ustedes sí sabemos que el dinero se necesita y que pero el dinero nunca lo vamos a tener, siempre va a hacer falta. Nunca vamos a decir esto es lo suficiente para poder hacer, pero tenemos que empezar con algo. Pero no me gustaría ser parte de respaldar algo con lo que no estoy de acuerdo.
Earlier, when we've been discussing this, a lot has been said saying, oh, this was carbs selection. That selection that CARB made was preliminary, meant to come back to us as the steering committee, as stated in the blueprint, that we have the right to expand the boundaries. So don't just put it off on CARB, the Air Resource Board, as stating that the district didn't have any power in the selection, because and not try to share some of the responsibility in that. When we talk about commitments, earlier in your presentation, you had stated that there's commitments to Southwest Fresno that the Air District can make, even if Southwest Fresno is not included in the boundary. There's no proof of that. Historically speaking, there's no proof of that, and moving forward, it's nothing that can be enforceable. So to state that is just saying that's what you wish you could do in a perfect world, but there's nothing that's going to enforce this air district to actually helping Southwest Fresno if it's not included in the boundary. Earlier in the presentation, it was also stated that there's benefits to the air monitoring and benefits from the community emission reduction program that we're going to be working on to the community outside of the boundary, and that there's still benefits. But the benefit still weighs more if you are included in that boundary. Number one, you would still be able to have actual active community member participation in the development of the program. Most importantly, requirements for quantifiable emission reduction targets from current baseline levels and measurable outcomes to drive action. If we leave out the industrial triangle, which is growing, which is already in place on paper, it's not about me or any of us showing up to getting involved with land use, as you said earlier. This is already done. We may not know about it in the sense that what's on paper unless you're reading it, but it's already there. We already can see what's already been passed by our city of Fresno. So back to the industrial triangle is already expanded into Southwest Fresno. If we don't include that area, which is going to become, as it already is, 6,000 trucks a day, to be coming into Amazon, to be coming into Ulta, next to a school, Orange Elementary, all of that area, if we don't include that, then we're missing the mark, because that is the emission that is happening already, and it's only going to get worse. If we don't include that area, then there's no possibility of identifying the new actions that are above and beyond existing state and regional programs. The CARB review and CARB governing board action on the community emissions reduction programs after air district adoption, which includes public comment period and CARB's governing board meeting, where communities can provide recommendations for CARB governing board consideration. That won't happen if they're not included. The annual quantifiable metrics, that means the actual numbers that we're trying to actually keep track of as the industrial growth happens. That won't be tracked if it's not inside this area. I still am requesting or recommending that we go into Southwest Fresno, and to remember that these options are not the only options. We still have the right to change this.
Buenas tardes a todos. En mi opinión propia, es un poco triste mirar todo lo que está pasando aquí realmente, porque como decimos, somos personas que venimos a donar nuestro tiempo para abogar por nuestras comunidades. Lamentablemente ustedes aquí en sus papeles están poniendo muchas veces la palabra considerar, honrar y reconocer, y lamentablemente no estamos mirando eso que están haciendo al excluir a la parte de la comunidad de Adams, ya que es una parte que está muy afectada por el smog. Entonces, voy a poner un ejemplo muy claro y espero que sea preciso. Yo tengo 2 hijos enfermos, supongamos, no los tengo, gracias a Dios. Uno de ellos está más enfermo que el otro. Voy al hospital porque mi economía no alcanza más que para uno. Voy al hospital, atiendo a uno. ¿Qué va a pasar si no atiendo al otro?
Entonces, en este caso tenemos que trabajar en conjunto y juntos para poder arreglar el área que está contaminada y la que no está contaminada, porque al mismo tiempo, si terminamos en una conclusión, vamos a llegar a una cosa sencilla y clara. Cuando un aire se voltea del aire sucio al aire limpio, ¿qué pasa? Se contamina por completo. Entonces queremos que el sureste de Fresno sea parejo y no disparejo. Queremos que incluyan y no excluyan. Esa es mi opinión.
Buenas tardes. Lo que yo pienso es que se está discutiendo mucho por lo mismo. Si ustedes no pueden expandir más, entonces, ¿para qué piden opiniones de nosotros como comunidad? Nosotros expresamos nuestras necesidades y estas son nuestras necesidades. Es lo que nosotros necesitamos, limpiar el área, pero eso incluye todo lo que está contaminado, no nada más un pedazo. Gracias.
Buenas noches. En mi opinión, pienso que no es justo que ustedes no incluyan a las comunidades que son más impactadas y también que ustedes hacen un mapa y no incluyen las industrias que están contaminando más, como es el Amazon, y también que no están incluyendo el sur de Fresno y West Fresno. Para mí es injusto. Yo tengo un hijo que tiene asma. Estoy aquí porque yo quiero un cambio, no solo por mi hijo, sino porque hay más niños que pueden tener la enfermedad. Yo estoy con este hijo, entonces por eso es que estoy aquí sentada. Yo tengo muchas cosas que hacer en mi casa. Soy madre de familia de 4 hijos, tengo un marido que atender y estoy aquí porque quiero un cambio. Es todo. Muchas gracias.
Buenas tardes. Yo estoy de acuerdo con Lilia y Isabel Vargas.
Good evening, everyone. So I just want to say that, looking at these maps, I'm not sure why there were 3 drawn when 2 and 3 look exactly the same. It looks like they're trying to, give us more options without really giving us options. With option 1, I just would feel like it'd be better if it was expanded into 41, closer towards Freeway 41. I forgot what was the other thing I needed to say. Anyhow, I forgot what else I needed to add, but so I'll hand it over.
Very briefly, I just feel like Ms. Mendez, who said that she felt like she was being played with. I feel like I'm being played with. I feel like the district's going to do what it wants to do. It's already made up its mind probably, and I'm just a prop in kind of a charade, and I'm very disappointed right now.
Thank you. I recognize and am sympathetic regarding the health issues that were shared earlier prior to me. And I'm just reminded of the big picture of what AB 617 is doing. It started, if I recall right, with AB 2588 in 1997 to begin to reduce air toxics that are affecting our families and causing asthma and other illnesses. CARB recognized that. They chose to bring forward AB 617 with some recommendations to attempt to address that. My personal opinion is that this is a rocket ship. I think we need to limit expansion, get on to testing, and see what the information tells us so that we can act on that as soon as possible. And quite frankly, I know because of 617 that CARB is not going to end with just South Central Fresno. So there's a lot more to come on this. But for now, we just need to get moving, in my opinion.
Yes, from a standpoint of Malaga, I'm looking at adjustment number 3, and it includes some of Malaga's industrial area, but not all of industrial area of Malaga, which is a concern to me. It should include more of Malaga's industrial area.
Hi, Kimberly McCoy here. As a
adult who was raised in West Fresno around an industrial facility who has asthma, who has a 7-year-old son who also has asthma, I feel that it's really, really a shame that Southwest Fresno community is not included in this process. Southwest Fresno community has the worst air quality in Fresno. And it just seems like that you guys are going through your motions or going down your checklist saying, we did this, check. We did that, check. What's the point of having an advisory or a steering committee if you're not taking what we're saying into consideration and making a move on it? A lot of these people around this table advocate all day long for Southwest Fresno. Even though we have the Southwest Pacific Plan, zoning is starting to be changed, and even though we're getting investment from TCC, that's still not enough. Southwest Fresno is one of the communities that is always overlooked. It's always last in line to be invested in. And it's just really a shame that this process is being dragged out this long and it's wasting a lot of people's time. This is the 4th meeting and we're still on boundary discussions. That's just pitiful.
I have the same feelings. I walked in here and I wasn't happy about this meeting. I'm also happy that, I'm not happy that I'm here, truthfully. I live in the tower. I don't have any major stationary sources of pollution around me. I'm buffered by trees. I don't understand why I'm here and residents from Southwest are not. NPR actually came out with a story 2 days ago that said, quote, pollution, much like wealth, is not distributed equally in the United States. Scientists and policymakers have long known that Black and Hispanic Americans tend to live in neighborhoods with more pollution of all kinds compared to white Americans. And because pollution exposure can cause a range of health problems, this inequity could be a driver of unequal health outcomes across the US. I don't have asthma, so I think that does show there's some unfairness happening here. And I don't want to take up time, but I think it's really important to hear from the public today before we make any decisions or any motions. And I'd also love to hear from the State Air Resources Board. They're here today. Perhaps they can give a little info on how they came to this decision and what they see the blueprint guidelines as stating. Should we go to the public or should we finish around?
Let's finish the committee and then we can go to the public. And we can follow up with additional committee comments if needed.
There's a lot of impassioned words that I hear here. First off, Ed, I totally agree. Let's get started. We need to test. We need to test in the areas that are contaminated. We need to start testing in the areas where people live, where there are schools, where we know there's contamination or polluted air. And we as a committee had discussed this last month, and we had arrived at a conclusion. I understand that there are these guiding principles. I'm not going to reiterate Ivanka's words. I think that it was covered very nicely around how there's essentially how to look at each of these principles. The second part of this is that I don't follow the local and state politics very closely. But what I do know, at least my understanding of this, is that this is a new approach, AB 617. And it's a community-based approach. Let's use it, right? The state, as I understand it, is watching. They're looking to see how this works, if it's effective. Let's show how we can be effective as a community. And the community is here at this table, and they are saying, we want these boundaries out to where we discussed last month. And it's not just about, oh, well, there's, rural land there today. Well, no, what is zoned and coming and planned there is an urban area. We are growing. We need to be accounting for where we are growing and how we are growing and set up the monitors in those places. Let's actually get the data about how it changes. This is an opportune time right now. We can actually watch to see what changes over time. It's a great opportunity for us. Let's actually set those boundaries up correctly now.
I had kind of a more fundamental process question about the fact that we came to a consensus about this issue already in February. And it was a pretty solid consensus from what I recall, we didn't have hardly any concerns, certainly not the concerns that we're hearing now. So I'd really like to rephrase what Ms. Mendez said kind of in the form of a question, which is, what is the community's input here? And what is the input of the steering committee? If it is to be an advisory role, do we get to decide what that advice is? I'm not sure if we have time for questions. I would love to hear the answer to this.
Yeah, I'll answer, and then if you have anything to add. I think the district's perspective is that the committee does serve in an advisory role. So as a facilitator, it's my job to get consensus, hear what everybody thinks, draw conclusions as to what the prevailing themes of the committee's input are, and then take those back to the Air District. And then from there, they'll use that input to develop the plan.
The plan, which is to apparently revisit or ignore what the consensus was? It seems that we've directly answered tonight what the answer is to that, about whether the district considers it in their purview and is willing to do that. And if so, I'm really questioning what we're doing here. Because you've come to us, now it makes sense. I completely understand that the district has to serve in some kind of facilitation role, but if you had come with some specific and technical concerns, that would be one thing. Instead, you have come to us with principles which don't seem to appear anywhere in the charter, and moreover, they're not even concerns in that none of them have any tests. There are only questions, no answers. Like, if we should obey we should follow what CARB set out for us, does the consensus proposal do that or not? If not, why not? Mm-hmm. If it is infeasible to add 15 or 20 members, why not? What test are we applying? All we have here are questions, which seems to me to be more like FUD rather than actual concerns. And what's worse is the behavior of the district in this has been just outrageous. Why are we only hearing these concerns now? The participation agreement, which I have here, let me read, says that we need to work to resolve conflicts in a positive, swift, and constructive manner. We have to play an active role by actively participating in the regularly scheduled meetings. If that's so, why has the pattern been to, instead of participating in the meeting, talk behind closed doors, delay any negative response until the 11th hour, and then spring all the concerns all at once, and revisit consensus until it meets your needs? I don't think the district has been following the rules that they set out for us. As people who set out rules and then say they don't have to follow them is pretty much the #1 thing that gets under my skin. I would like to know who you guys report to, who I can write letters to. Is it the state, the governor? I would very much like to know what they have to say, and if you need to answer to them about this. This seems to me, unless you can clarify my understanding of what the purpose of the steering committee is, to be a pretty solid violation of public process.
So just to respond to one part of your comments, we've brought staff here today, and we'll continue to have staff moving forward to answer those questions as arise and to bring up issues as they arise. I'm not a technical expert or a subject matter expert. I'm here to facilitate and to get the committee's opinions and thoughts. So moving forward, I think we will have district staff present who can answer questions and raise issues.
Executive Director still here, because he obviously is the top dog and should be able to answer any question, correct?
I don't know if he's still here.
Was that Samir?
Where's
Well, let's finish public comment, or the committee's comments
I would
first.
very much like to hear what he has to say. But yeah, by all means.
Hi, I'm Janelle, and I'm one of the physicians on this committee, and frankly, really disappointed by just how things are going. I feel like we all have wasted our precious time coming here, giving our well thought out opinions and concerns for the community, and I feel like our intellect, we're just insulted by these maps that you've proposed. It's like our advice was never actually seriously considered, and you're throwing a dog a bone by saying, we'll add a little bit more, and maybe even take some away. Like Ms. Mendez put earlier, you know, that, and the other committee members about their family members, the communities that they live in with asthma, and these are people who are busy working and, you know, being affected by all these health disparities. They're already at disadvantage and they're trying their best. I don't have asthma. I'm moving soon to the Bay Area, partly because the air quality is so bad here, but I plan to stay here and come back every month to try to help Fresno. And I feel like my time is being wasted here. I'm between nights. So I find that it's just, and I want this to move forward. It's not like we're trying to slow it down, but I feel like the Air District is just, frankly, dicking around and not really taking us seriously. So if you want our input, then please take it and really, this is supposed to be you guys taking our input seriously, and I feel like you just have us here to say we're here, but you're not actually taking any of our advice. So, I don't know. I talk to my patients all the time, and I say, hey, I'm on this, I see asthma, COPD every single day. I intubate them, I put them on machines, I do it all the time. And to come here and just to see going, oh, you know, we're just gonna focus on this area and we don't care about the top 1% that sits Southwest Fresno. And we said it over and over again, and these are communities, urban communities are being frankly ignored. And to have them say, oh, maybe later. Like, no, it's now. I find that there's no heart to this district board. They don't care. And I think, frankly, it's, you know, I feel frustrated for my patients. And everyone who's working hard to be here to actually put time. So, I'm just saying, I don't have to be here. I really don't. I'm gonna leave. I don't have to be here. So just treat us with respect. I feel like you guys you're not actually taking what we say into account. So at the next meeting, I'd really like us to move forward and not this back and forth about boundaries. We can set the boundaries. We had a strong consensus last time. To come back with this, you know, like, it's not even, these are terrible, like, it's just an insult to all of us here. All right, that's it.
First, on the behalf of the community in which you serve, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa. I'm a retired planner, and this is why I think that the boundary should have a massive footprint. You may say, oh, we only have $80 million for the first year, and something's going to get convoluted, and somebody's not going to get included. But you know what? This is a multi-year approach from the state. It will be a multi-year funding, and if you include everything now, you get all the numbers. Guess what, guys? You can ask the state for more money, more staff. You're already staffing up. How can you justify staffing up with not a big footprint? Who's power building? The other thing I want to say is also too, you are not working in good faith with the communities. By having this charade of, now we're in month 3, 4 of the boundaries, you are not working in good faith. You are not listening to the communities. You are creating a situation where environmental racism, I'm using the big R, not the little r, is now going to be occurring. You have to include West Fresno. There is just no way around it. If the TCC can say they need $70 million to do environmental stuff on the west side to upgrade, and make the air better, there's a college going in. And to not look at that as future growth and how that's going to impact the number of cars, transit, whatever, and not to take a foothold and start to get that data now, means that you guys are incompetent. Maybe not you guys as employees, but your executive director is, your top dog where is he? He needs to answer some questions of this committee. Because honey, I'm a Chihuahua and Chihuahuas don't give up. And as far as wasting people's time, I have congestive heart failure. I'm one of those patients she will probably see. When the air quality gets bad, I go into hermit mode. So I don't get a summer. I don't get a winter. I get 6 months out of the year. And for you to sit here and say, and oh, by the way, I have the Cadillac of insurance. I will never want for anything, but I'm here because there are poor people in the city, and indigent folk, and homeless, and children that aren't so lucky. And it makes me mad that you're wasting my life. It makes me mad that makes me mad that by your actions could actually lead to the death of an individual. Think about that as you do your work. You think about it when you do your work. You think about it when you do your businesses. How are your actions either going to make the community better or worse? Because you're either a good steward of the community that you're in, or you're the problem. Now, once again, let's make this a big footprint. It's a multi-year project. And when you look at a big footprint, you look at where are your top hot spots that you have to take care of, and you start making a list of the things you got to do and how you're going to solve them, people. It's not brain science. What it is incompetence on your side.
Mi nombre es Hilda y sí estoy de acuerdo con todo lo que están diciendo. Y yo tengo asma también y todos mis hijos tienen asma. Es todo lo que te voy a decir.
Thank you, Hilda. So, a couple of thoughts. I can't sit by and not say something. And I really appreciate and I respect everybody's passion. I feel for your children. I feel for yours, and I certainly am empathetic. I'm an environmentalist myself, and I know, Lisa, you pointed to me and said I need to think about what I do. I am a true blue environmentalist. I just look at it from the other side of the coin. So today, as we sit here, there are 14,000 Fresnans looking for work. They want jobs so that they can provide for their families and they can have insurance. That's why I support and why I work very hard every day to bring good businesses like Amazon to Fresno. Like Amazon to Fresno, because they pay a $15 an hour wage to begin with. They have health insurance, full coverage. And you know what? They don't make a thing. That's all made someplace else. But I feel very strongly, and that's what I get up every day, and I'm so super excited to go to my work to do, is because we have dropped it from 25,000 people unemployed. And folks may think that is not a big deal. And maybe that's because you have a job. But for the person who's looking for work who doesn't have a job, or somebody who works in the fields 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day cutting lettuce or picking tomatoes or picking peaches or whatever, having a job with insurance is an important thing, and that's the thing that motivates me. So I feel good every day, and every time we can land another company that does another job, that provides another job, that is a day we shrink the number of unemployed in our city. And when we can get to where California employment average is 4% unemployment, we are now in the county 8.9% unemployment. If we can get to 4%, you know, it's those folks who have insurance that can go see the doctor, who can get the asthma medication that they need, who can get treated for the things that they need to get treated to. So that is incredibly important. I know the young lady or woman over there said, you know, I've got one child on health insurance, the other one I don't. I'd sure like her to be able to have where she had health insurance for all of her kids. So let me go there for a second. Then the other thing is I'm sorry, the Air Pollution Control District is not incompetent, and I really resent the fact that folks are going to call them incompetent or tell them. Here's the reason why they have gone down this path and taken this time. Because the AB 617 says CARB's responsibility is to designate the communities. And CARB had a public process that I think you were involved in. I wasn't. I didn't follow it that closely at the time. But there was a public process that folks had a chance to put input into the system, into the process. Both people from the Fresno area, and I think the Council on Leadership was involved in that in Sacramento. And everybody pretty much, with the exception, I guess, including Daleville, had come to an acceptance that this was going to be the area. And so their task was not to change the boundaries. Our task isn't to change the boundaries. Can we make adjustments? Apparently AB 617 says we can make adjustments. We're not making adjustments. We are doubling the size. We're going way beyond having some incremental adjustments. So to answer your question, sir, their boss is the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District Board. So they answer to that board. So if you want to write a letter, I guess you could write a letter to the Air Board. Buddy Mendez is the supervisor in charge of the board right now. He's the chairman of that board. And they will answer to that. So they're trying to deal with this wholesale change when everybody, I think, pretty much thought that these Malaga and Calwa were going to be the areas for this. So I do want to stand up for them, and I do want to say they're trying to find a way between what CARB did and said and what was agreed upon. And the thing that gets under my skin is when we set the goalpost here, and then, whoa, we decided we want to move the goalpost over here. And so you change the goalpost. And I've seen that happen on a community level and community advocate level basis time and time again. And that goes back to land use planning. So the Southwest specific plan that was put in place last year took out all of the industrial. There is no light industrial or heavy industrial designation. It actually converted land that was industrial, designated industrial for many, many years, converted that into mixed use, community use, or even business parks. So that is now out. This area, the industrial triangle, has and will continue to be our heavy industrial area and has been since 1958, when it was beginning the designation process of that. So there's nothing in this board will do that will change that plan or will change that. Now, that's not to say outside forces won't do stuff later on, but this board, again, doesn't have any land use authority. So to think that that's going to change anything doesn't really comport with the law or AB 617. So I just want to put that out there and let folks know. I have offered to the Air Board folks, I've said, hey, I'm happy to come up and do a land use planning presentation and tell folks exactly what the city has planned and where they're going, where we're going. But there's no guarantee what will get built out, when it gets built out. I think the industrial triangle will get built out because there are, we need the spot. We need to have those jobs. We need to have areas to be able to put industrial companies in the work that they do, which is incredibly important for us getting down, instead of being double-digit unemployment like we have been chronically for 40 years, we can get down, as we have recently, into single-digit, and eventually it'd be nice to be the state level of 4%. So anyway, I think we should keep it at the adjustment number 1, and I would advocate for that on behalf of the people of Malaga, Calwa, and really for the city of Fresno. So thank you.
So I think if we want to invoke jobs, I think the most important thing that we should consider is the quality of life for the working class individuals that will, right, within the next 15 years, the people that will be living in that area, that will be working in that area. It's an area just west of the intersection of 99 and 41. We talked about it at the last meeting, and it was very clearly supported that this area, which has a very, very high and exceptionally high Cal-Enviro screen score relative to the rest of the Central Valley, and an exceptionally high population density, and a diverse one at that. We established that this is a critical moment for this committee to include them within these boundaries, and to see this widely supported, widely substantiated, and a very colorfully supported, in the sense of having a lot of personal experience put forth very graciously. To have that opportunity taken off the table is not only insulting, but it steps in the way of progress. And I think if we hope to really maximize on this opportunity, we should really think to include that. And if it's a question of economy, which was mentioned earlier on, we have time after making this decision to economize the distribution of monitoring within the area. There's an opportunity for that economization. So I think to think that we're sacrificing on that economy of scale is, I don't think that's as big a concern as what we should be considering in terms of the quality of life for a lot of individuals that will be inhabiting what is quickly becoming an industrial center, an urban center. And so I would plead that everyone consider expanding these boundaries to include these critical non-attainment areas. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to go to public comment now. If we'll come back for committee comments after public comment, if that's okay. So please raise your hand. Cody will hand you the microphone. We are running behind a little bit, so I would ask that you do limit your comments to 2 minutes.
What's the easiest way to run from a line?
Sure, if you want to form a line, that will work.
Okay, my name is Gary Hunt. I've been a resident of Southwest Fresno for a long time. I'm an asthmatic also, along with other respiratory issues that I've acquired in the community. But the gentleman there that works for the city, I'm gonna agree with you on certain levels. Why don't we open up North Fresno to the next large conglomerate of companies that are coming in and employ our people to come over there to work? Won't you share the burden of the asthma and the other diseases that are going around in air pollution? Because, or we can do this. Let's switch houses for 2 years. I move to your location and you move to my location. Because apparently you don't live in the 93706. You're part of the redlining situation. When you mention 1958, we can get really historical about how the banks and how Fresno decided to redline Southwest Fresno and start moving forward with the neglect. And you're part of the problem. For the other people who are, you talk about, well, they need a good paying wage and a good job. What good is a good paying job if you're sick? I work for Amazon, but I'm an asthmatic. I got COPD. The common sense is not there. What's there is the greed level and the selfishness of, well, it's not my backyard, so it's not going to affect me. I'll bring in these big companies to get the tax base for Fresno, but I don't care about the people that live there. And that's what I'm hearing tonight.
Hello, everybody. My name is Keyshawn White. I am an environmental justice advocate from the Southwest area of Fresno. And I've been monitoring the air quality of Southwest Fresno for about 2 years now. And in the case of money, with less than $20,000, just put that out there. So money was never an issue. But the fact is, I came to the conclusion that the Southwest area has the outstanding most worst air quality in the Fresno district. And with that, I think it's not only as bad, it's going to get worse. We're also like expanding the actual industrial triangle. We're placing the community college smack dab right next to a middle school. And I think it's very important that we should really expand and conclude the Southwest area into this bill. Just in the typical fact is just informing the community about the health risks about living in that area for not only a short period of time, but also a long period of time. And also to make change and get a difference and also better the quality of life of the Southwest area, in which we all know is a historically black area, black and brown. So, yes.
I'm Janet Dietz-Kamay. I'm a member of CVAC, and I'm also a Fresno City resident. Additionally, I have asthma. I got asthma when I moved to Fresno. I'm lucky. I have air conditioning. I can keep my windows closed. On bad days, people who do not have that luxury have their windows open and are exposed to this bad air. I have been a part of the PM 2.5 project, and I'm a part of the AB 617 project. I have consistently said we need to focus on the most highly polluted areas and tackle that. That would include Southwest Fresno. We need to focus on the areas that this steering committee decided. I was a part of identifying communities. What are we going to do? How are we going to sort out this as finding communities who can represent what is needed to clear and clean our air? Now we have a steering committee. These people are a part of where the problem exists. They know what's going on with this situation, and they have ideas. They have recommendations. They need to be heard and listened to. This is the 4th meeting, I understand. I see no progress. I think that the committee needs to be the driver of this. The committee, the steering committee, the community that the AB 617 tried to identify. So let's focus on the air. Let's focus on what we need to do to clean this air. Let's focus on including in this parameter the highly polluted areas. And I also extend, although we're not talking about it tonight, let's permanently monitor those areas to identify if we're making progress in cleaning the air. Let the committee be the driver.
Yo digo que específicamente miro que sí, no se hizo escuchar de veras a los directivos para este problema, sino que ya traían un tema y de decir ya así se va a hacer. Y la verdad, cuando no están sufriendo lo que están sufriéndose las familias en esta área, los que viven, ustedes no les duele. Dicen, sí, me duele. No, a nadie le afecta como a la persona que lo está sintiendo. Es como cuando dicen a alguien se le muere a alguien. Oh, lo siento mucho. Si no te ha pasado, no lo sientes. En primer lugar, si la gente quiere trabajar, tiene que estar sano para trabajar. Ustedes con su trabajo y la gente vaya enferma ahí ahogándose, eso está trabajando la gente a fuerzas. Está la gente sobreviviendo, no está viviendo. Lo que se quiere es vivir. Y lo que nosotros necesitamos es que de verdad nos tomen en cuenta. Ah, hay muchas cosas aquí que están mal. Nosotros venimos a las juntas y le decimos a la gente, vengan a la junta para pedir esto. Hasta se ríen de nosotros, de que dicen, ¿qué vas a hacer? No vas a hacer un cambio. ¿Para qué vas? Mejor quédate a descansar en tu casa. Nosotros hacemos, y miren, a lo que vamos a regresar. O sí, el beneficio lo van a tener otras personas. Yo quisiera que de verdad se tomaran el tiempo y la decisión. Yo no digo que son incompetentes nadie, yo sé que están haciendo lo mejor que pueden, pero nosotros necesitamos más que lo mejor que pueden. Nosotros necesitamos que le digan a las personas que los mandan que de verdad se necesita un cambio aquí. No se necesita que, perdón, no se necesita que vengan y nos den a tole con el dedo, que nos animen a un proyecto que no se llega a acuerdo a nada bueno. Para nosotros no es bueno la decisión que ustedes finalmente van a tomar. Para nosotros es una vergüenza regresar a nuestra comunidad y decir, ¿saben qué? Ganan otros. ¿Y saben qué? Nosotros seguimos sin trabajo, seguimos enfermos, porque es verdad que dice, hay trabajos para muchas personas, pero muchas personas, si ya somos mayor de edad o si no tenemos mucho estudio, no tenemos oportunidad. Gracias a Dios yo estoy sana, pero hay mucha gente que estamos enfermos y estamos pobres y queremos trabajar y todavía no tenemos trabajo. Yo no tengo trabajo. Ojalá y que me dé un trabajo, Señor, en su empresa. Muchas gracias, y yo de veras quiero que se tienten el corazón, que exijan ustedes, por favor, por nosotros, por esta comunidad, a que salga otra cosa que beneficie más a la comunidad, que sí lo necesita. Que dejen por una vez de darlo todo a las personas que se miran bien. Yo no estoy a contra de nadie, pero los servicios siempre se van para la gente rica. Como dicen, el dinero, ¿quién lo gana? Los ricos. Todo lo bien, todo lo bueno, los ricos son las mejores áreas, las mejores comunidades, las mejores escuelas. Los que estamos pobres. Los que estamos necesitados, ahí nos vamos a quedar. Los enfermos, ahí nos vamos a quedar enfermos. Esta comunidad necesita aire limpio, necesita que nosotros no tengamos que ir a otra comunidad a respirar aire limpio. Gracias. Soy Margarita Villaseñor y trabajo en esta comunidad. Me gusta trabajar con la comunidad y ahí estoy. Yo no quiero que esto se quede ahí nomás. Quiero ver que de verdad pasó algo bueno. Gracias.
Hi, I'm Laura Rosenberger. We should include the Edison area. The air I felt was very bad out there, and I see that when the air monitors are high in certain areas, it's because they're downwind of an industry or a fast food place. And we should also extend the boundaries east to Peach Avenue, because the highly populated area around Kings Canyon and Butler Avenue, there's new low-cost housing, lots of condominiums and apartments, and bad air quality. There's something in the air, I don't know what it is, that blows from the south. When the wind comes from the south, it goes into right in front of the IRS building, into the IRS building. They only change their air filters once a year, and I still sense pollution coming inside, and the workers are affected in their productivity. But no, health insurance is unable to detect or reverse the health impacts of air pollution. Antihistamines are only temporary and shorten life expectancy. And what works better is organic vegetables, water, and mats.
Thank you.
And we can move the air monitors, have mobile air monitors to move from the east of Fresno to the west of Fresno. And there's a an APIS rental sensor. APIS company rents sensors that test for like 3 different gases, and they're for $750 each month. So we can try for test a lot of different chemicals right around the industries and the warehouses and mobile air monitors. And there's a research grant. We should make sure we put in our proposals for the research grant next week if we don't have enough funding in our budget, and work with everyone to help everyone succeed in getting their equipment. So if we can just give the equipment from one person to the next, so the equipment is always working all day, and someone's always using it. And we can check the wind and know exactly, because the wind changes all the time in Malaga. You have to keep track of wind direction. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Hello. Just wanted to say a few things just based off the meeting. Again, I just really want you guys to honor residents' wants. I constantly feel like the district is going against what the committee wants, and you know, that's not fair. I feel like, well, that is halting the process, and at the end, I think that's also burning out people, and which is a real bummer to see, especially if you see how much people really care and how much it affects their lives. And then based off of the maps that I saw inside the packet, I really feel like the plan of that was to kind of add certain areas and exclude certain areas so you guys could like divide people and kind of have the committee now working against each other. And again, I don't think that's fair. I think it was loud and clear at the last hearing where folks said that they did not want to reduce the boundaries but add to the boundaries, and though what we have in the maps in the packet does not reflect of what the community wanted last time. Include the industrial triangle. I mean, the city is making is developing that area for industrial facilities, and so I think we need to be proactive and monitor those areas instead of, you know, hoping that later on that, you know, Southwest or Fresno gets becomes another gets funding for this program again. Southwest Fresno has been waiting for such a long time. I don't want them to wait any longer. Again, I don't think that they should wait any longer. And there's residents that came last time that wanted to be included in that committee, but unfortunately, the one resident that was able to drive, because the other ones take a bus and it would take hours and hours just to get here, her son, which is really sick with asthma, got sick yesterday, so she was not able to attend the meeting today. And again, honor what the residents wanted. The committee voted on expanding the boundaries at the last meeting. Let's move forward with that. That's what they wanted. They voted on it. So let's honor what the committee wants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aiden. At the beginning of this meeting, there was a phrase used, a transformative expansion, and I think that's actually maybe accurate. This would be a transformative expansion, and that's what we need. It would be transformative for a lot of people who are suffering the most. And I want to speak to this idea that we need to honor CARB's decision. Ivanka spoke to this. It was never CARB's intention to lay down boundaries that would not then be up for discussion by the steering committee. It was always their intention that this would be part of the process. There's been a lot of smoke and mirrors today talking about principles that the Air District puts up. These aren't principles, as was mentioned. These are barriers, and I would have liked to see a little bit more effort on the Air District's board to figure out how do we address these issues. They're not principles, because that elevates it to a standing that it doesn't have. The question is, are the boundaries being proposed by the Air District actually capturing the places that the steering committee members want prioritized? I think it's obvious they're not, so that needs to be figured out. And there was also discussion and comments made that there's more to come on this, that this is just a test. Well, from what I've heard today, this can't just be a test. The needs are too urgent. It's got to be now. And as was mentioned already, this would be a start to realizing the change that we need to see. And the Air District and CARB, I encourage you guys to find a way. Make it happen. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Aiden. My name is Veronica Garibay. I just want to clarify a few things because I think it's important for the entire committee to have all of the information available with respect to AB 617. The $80 million amount was thrown out a few times as the Air District only has $80 million. I'd like to clarify that that's $80 million for district implementation of AB 617, and on top of that, there's $245 million available in incentive funding to implement AB 617, and the governor has proposed to maintain that level of funding in his current budget proposal. So to say that there's not enough money, there is a lot of resources available to do that. To the other point, Aiden and Ivanka and others have already talked about it. ARB, in making their decision in September of last year, had a pretty broad discussion around flexibility for local steering committees to finalize and determine the geographic boundary as laid out in the blueprint that was approved. And finally, the blueprint everywhere, every element, every appendix talks about the importance of community involvement and the importance of public process. The community today is saying very loud and clear that they do not feel that they are being heard, that their time is being wasted. I don't know how the Air District legitimizes this process in front of ARB when they go for approval of the emission reduction plan later this year if the community doesn't feel like they're being heard. And for those folks who ask about who can we go talk to about what this process, how this process is going, yes, there's the governing board of the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution District Board, which oversees the district operations. But there's also, on Monday, actually, the state legislature, the Assembly Natural Resources Committee is holding a hearing starting at 2 o'clock on this very issue to hear directly from communities how this process is going because they want to see how this is going. And on Thursday, the California Air Resources Board is having its monthly meeting, and the first item on its agenda is to hear from constituents about how this process is going. If anybody wants to hitch a ride, we're going, come talk to me, and we're happy to provide the transportation for you to get there to speak directly to state agencies and state officials about how this process is going. And it's not just about the boundary. I'd like to clarify the criteria that is required to be included in an emission reduction plan includes a number of issues. You have to establish quantifiable metrics. You have to establish thresholds and not go beyond those baseline levels that will be established. So yes, it's very much connected to land use around what type of uses are allowed, what type of emissions are going to be continued allowed, and what type of uses would occur in the boundary area. There's also annual tracking requirements. There's measurements. You have to report this data. You have to document when and how and where these emissions, whether or not emissions are actually being reduced in the selected boundary. This is why it's so critical to include the neighborhoods that the steering committee already reached a consensus on last week, why they want to see the process. You have community organizations who've stepped up and are doing air monitoring. You have youth leaders who are doing air monitoring in the work and are recognizing the importance of that. And if you skip ahead to the second presentation on air quality, the systems that are already there, you can see how sparse air monitoring already is in the very neighborhoods that we're talking about, yet you're hearing very loud and clearly from community about what's actually required in the emission reduction plan and why this is so important for the community. So thank you.
Thank you. Can I get the microphone? I think Ivanka had another comment you'd like to make.
I know it's late, and thank you everyone for hanging in there. I just want to state that the purpose of AB 617, the actual law above the actual blueprint, was to create, because of the history of that, we've already seen that this cycle of these communities continually being dumped on with the industry, pro-economy, but the industry that's giving the higher burden to the disadvantaged communities. That was the purpose of the law. This goes beyond just the blueprint, right? I want to state that because it's made to be a ground-up approach, not starting from the top down. If you actually look at who is the governing board of the Air District, of those 14 board members, how many of them are actually environmentalists and how many of them are actually part of a medical field versus pro-economy, pro-ag, and unfortunately mostly all Caucasian, even if they don't want to claim it. So what I'm stating is that we're having to use a process that breaks the cycle of the environmental racism from the bottom up because it's only getting to this air district. So everyone, you're saying top dog Samir. It's higher than that. Our whole board is being ran for pro-economists. And Larry, you lied. You're lying about things when it came to the Southwest Specific Plan and about how land use is directly involved. Now, we could sit here all night and go back and forth into the details, but you're making the blatant conversations to represent all the white folks that are on the board. They are not representative of the neighborhoods that we're trying to improve, and that's why we're here. So I would just like to second Veronica in stating that we have to take this above just Samir and the staff of AB 617 and the board, because we're not, I'm leaving very just, you know, feeling just as bummed out as you that we're not making progress in this. But part of the cycle isn't just, part of the cycle is not going to stop when we have the Air District Board that are not the ones that are in our corner to begin with. We have an opportunity, this is an opportunity to stop a type of environmental genocide. To those who don't believe racism exists, this is what it looks like in 2019. This is what we're doing and sitting here. This is what racism looks like today when people don't believe it exists anymore. I just want to say one more thing, that I motion to include Southwest Fresno in the boundary.
Thank you.
Yes, just a comment to Mr. Larry. You know, coming from a farm working family and being a farm worker myself, please do not ever think that you know what's best for our communities. We live in those communities, we've worked those jobs, and honestly, we bust our butts off, and honestly, we do not have access to that medical access, that health care that you're talking about. We don't. You know what? There's my family members, community members, relatives, instead of seeking, going and seeking health care here, they rather make a trip to the border because it's cheaper. Even though they have access to health insurance here, it's so expensive because their copay. Everything's got more expensive. You have no clue what we have to pay. So next time that you actually say what's best for us, please ask one of us. Thank you.
I think,
Well, health insurance is not equal, and ER visits are not, they're expensive. And our ERs are busy and crowded as is, so to say, let's have pollutants, let's have asthma, run and as long as they have health insurance, everything's fine. No, that's completely does not make any sense. I'm so sorry, I can't agree with that. I just wanted to say that, yes, jobs are important and wealth, livelihood is important, but you can't work, you can't have a livelihood if they have cardiopulmonary disorders.
Thank you. I don't want to cut anybody off. We are after 8 o'clock. I'll give you a
comment in regards to his comment around.
Is it related to the boundaries?
Okay. You mentioned about Amazon. Great, Amazon's coming in. Great, they're giving people $15. Great, they're giving somebody, you know, some people insurance. Great, fabulous. The reason we need to look at Amazon is the way they're going to be distributing. They sent out a contract for delivery of their goods. They're not going to go United Postal Service. They're not going to go UPS. They're going to have their own. They're going to be duplicating services. And that's why we need to look at the delivery of their goods coming in and out of Fresno. Because is it going to increase air pollution? We don't know unless we look at it, Larry.
Thank you. So there is a motion, there is a second. I think our first objective as a committee is to reach consensus, and I would say that the vast majority of committee members who spoke today, to paraphrase, want to include Southwest Fresno, want to maintain the committee's original recommendation to include the top 1%, to encompass 99, to account for future growth. I think I heard I think I counted 5 people who spoke in favor of moving forward with a smaller boundary, with Larry specifically advocating for the first adjustment map.
I just want to be specific and explicitly say that in that correction, I am motioning again, like I did in February, to include Southwest Fresno and making it to Marks and American, including the top 1%. But just saying top 1% was not all I said, including American to a Marks Avenues. That map that is printed up is not what was specifically said if you look on record what was stated in our February. It's not on all of these. It's actually what was actually said from our last meeting. Marks and American.
Just like to make a brief comment before you vote. I just wanted to welcome the vote on this motion, and I'm not going to, get into specific comments that were made. I am the top big boss, I think somebody called me, but there really are a number of conversations that have to happen. Top dog, yes, between myself, Richard Corey with CARB, and then of course, in the interest of moving forward, the recommendation that comes out of the committee, which you'll vote on right now, and we'll see. It sounds like there's strong support for including, as Ivanka just mentioned, and what I heard loud and clear from a large number of the members of the committee here, to include expansive boundaries that include the Southwest Fresno portion, the 99 corridor, which I think sounds, we definitely have to figure out a way to include that. Industrial triangle, which I think there's a lot of room for, I heard some different potentials there, which I think we definitely have to take into account. And then all the industrial concerns around Malaga, which again, depending on where the committee goes with this, we definitely have to make adjustments to capture all of those concerns. So I just want everybody here to know that we will welcome that recommendation, that my commitment is to work with my colleagues within a very short amount of time. I think we talked about a week to see what we could do, including, if that's the way the motion here goes with the passage of that, the Southwest Fresno portion. And so that we're going to work on that, and we'll see how much we can do. So with that, I don't know if any other comments before you guys take your vote on that.
So I did want to say, I don't remember your name, ma'am, I'm sorry. Ivanka. Blanca? Ivanka, okay, sorry. I don't want to take up the time going, I know you said that I had lied, and I certainly don't think, nor would I knowingly ever lie to this committee or anyone else for that matter. But offline, maybe you can tell me and point out what it was that I lied about, so you and I can have a discussion about that, because it's certainly not something that I wanted to do, nor intended to do, nor would I like to do. So maybe we can talk about that afterwards. So thank you.
I just wanted to say one more quick thing. Apologize, I know it's late. I wanted you to know the reason we brought this item back to the committee was in talking, a number of you reached out to me and actually talked to me about this item. And we had good conversations, a lot of support for Southwest Fresno being a part of the community. What we didn't want to do, and the biggest request I got back in those conversations was making sure that we had a joint decision-making process on the final boundaries. We were faced with the pressure of making a decision very quickly, doing it based on the recommendation with certain constraints that we talked about today, and then basically, depending on where those boundaries ended up, and I'm not sure exactly where they would end up, because I think that's why we're having the conversation today, an immediate reaction back that we didn't, for example, take all of the recommendations into consideration. And as I was talking to different individuals about this who were concerned about where we were heading with this, the biggest request we got was, don't do that. Don't make a decision that doesn't allow us to have the conversation, especially if that full expansive boundary is not included. And so this is new, by the way. This program is new. This is nothing like we've done before. us, the steering committee, even CARB, is continuing to work with us and trying to respond to all of these different concerns that are coming up. It is taking longer. It is disappointing. It's not a good thing for me to hear about how frustrated everybody here is, and some of the adjectives that were used are not pleasant to hear, but are important for me to hear. I mean, I take all of that in the most positive possible way that I think I can take that feedback. But part of why we wanted to bring it back here was because we didn't want to, in quote unquote, unilaterally make those decisions without hearing from you. And we've heard loud and clear from the committee. And the commitment that I just mentioned before was that we're going to work with our colleagues to try to maximize the potential of these recommendations that come out of whatever it is with this vote. And hopefully we can include Southwest Fresno. Hopefully we can include the 99 corridor and other parts that were encompassed in that recommendation that was made. And it's going to have to be swift. And we're going to just move forward at that point and take you up on, I know a lot of you individually have offered to help us figure out how we're going to deal with the committee and all the other issues that go along with that. So that's a commitment, and I do take everything, positively, and from that I mean as an opportunity. There's very strong critiques that came up today, and we'll listen to those and see what we could do and do our best. So I appreciate all the feedback. And with that, I'm just going to turn it back over
Thank you.
to Jessica.
So just so it's clear for the record, Ivanka has made a motion to include Southwest Fresno in the boundary, specifically American to Marks. And I heard a second from this direction. Lisa? All right, so with a show of hands, all those in favor? I think we're wrapping up. So I count 19. And all those opposed? 5. 19 to 5. So the motion carries.